Right. So today I'm going to discuss about PhD interviews. Okay. And there are certain common things which are applicable to all kinds of PhD interviews, irrespective of which institute you are going for a PhD interview. So initially I will be discussing that, and then later on I'll be discussing about of interviews in specific institutes, like what do they look for in a particular PhD candidate. So the first thing you have to do is, before going to any institute is, or applying to an institute is to search the institute for the kind of faculties they have, and see and look for a faculty which is working in a research field which matches your interests. So this is the first thing you need to do as a PhD candidate. And if you're not sure of what kind of research you want to, in which field you want to pursue research in, then I would advise not to go for a PhD right now, because you're not prepared. So the first and the foremost thing you need to do is, you have to identify your area of expertise or your area of research, right? And if you haven't identified that, then you should look for some certain projects, certain internships before coming on to or before deciding where you want to pursue a PhD. Okay, so this is the first thing. The second thing is, once you go apply for an institute, the most common thing that is asked in every PhD interview is, why do you want to join this particular institute? Okay, so the first thing that you have to say is that this so and so guides, it could be one, it could be more than one, match your area of interest. Okay, and the second thing you need to tell them is that why this particular institute, where you will tell them about the kind of instruments that are available in the institute, or the kind of how will that particular institute cater to your research needs. For example, you are a organic chemist, so the basic requirements for you is, you should have NMR, a high resolution NMR. You should have mass spectrometry, okay, to carry out the structural elucidation of the compound that you have synthesized. You should have IR, and there are certain other instruments that are required for the structural elucidation in organic chemistry. So if these instruments are available, then you can also say that these particular institutes, these particular instruments are available in your institute, which will help in my research area. Okay, do not ever say that it is a very prestigious institute and that is why I want to join here. That is all bullshit. Everybody knows that. I mean, this is a very common answer and nobody cares about this. Okay, so all they are looking for is, how much have you researched about that particular institute, and do you have any clue of why you are doing a PhD, or under whom you are doing a PhD. So this is the first thing you need to do in any PhD interview. Okay, the second thing is, they will ask you, why do you want to pursue a PhD? Why do you want to pursue a PhD? Well, you can have your own answers, but they are looking for very motivated students. If you tell them, I want to be a lecturer, or I want to be I don't know, I want to get a government job or anything like that, they won't be impressed. You have to be you should portray yourself as a highly motivated student. You shouldn't portray yourself, you should actually be a highly motivated student, because if you're doing a PhD and you're just doing a PhD for namesake, or for just getting that tag of a doctor, prefixing your name, I mean, then that is not a valid reason for doing a PhD, and it will be very difficult for you to pursue a PhD. So until and unless you have a general interest of pursuing a PhD, only then you should apply for the PhD interviews. Okay, I mean, otherwise it will be hell or difficult for you to complete your PhD, especially in India. I mean, there are a lot of struggles as a PhD student, and it will be very difficult for you, right? Anyway, so the third thing is, you should have a sound technical background. So for example, if you want to do research in the area of nanotechnology, then you should have some prior research you should have some prior research expertise or experience before applying for that particular institute. So the guide, it's not necessary, but the guide always looks for someone who has a sound technical background already in that particular field. So what that helps is, the guide knows that he or she does not have to spoon feed you. You know certain things, certain aspects about that field already, since you have done research in that area. So it will be you will adjust faster than a student who has no technical background in that area. Okay, so this is one thing that they are looking for. The fourth important thing is that you should have you should be confident. Okay, and you should have good communication skills. You should not be how do I put it? Like, what, for example, they ask you a particular question, you should speak loudly. You should not shout, but you should be speaking in a tone so that everyone in the room can hear what you are trying to tell. You should portray yourself as a very confident person or as a very confident student. That is very important. Okay, and so these are the certain common things that you have to focus on. Okay, like for example, if you do not know an answer to the question, you just say I don't know. Don't try and play around with the question, or just like speak slowly or in a voice that nobody can hear. That shows you that you're not confident with whatever you are saying. So no matter how intimidating the interview is, you should always be confident and speak loudly. Okay, so these are certain common tips that are applicable for the PhD interviews. Okay, now if I tell you one more thing that they can ask you is that why are you different than the other PhD students? Okay, so this is also a very common question that they might ask you, that why should we pick you? I mean, what is the difference between you and the other students? So over there, you don't have to downgrade other students and say I'm the best, or you shouldn't sound arrogant, but you should definitely have an answer ready for this. It could be anything. For example, if you have some certain kind of technical research already in that field, you can say that I have sound interest, or I'm a fast learner, so I'll be quickly able to grasp the concepts that are important for research. Or you could tell them that you have high hopes from yourself, you are very motivated. You shouldn't talk about the other students that I am better than the others. You shouldn't portray yourself like that. You should just focus on your strengths. Okay, now okay, so what else? Okay, one more point is that they are looking for a person who requires the minimum amount of time of the guide. For example, if I am a guide, I'll be looking for a student who can work on his own. Okay, so he can work independently. So you should also convey this point to the interviewers, that you are a person who is going to work independently. Okay, who is going to have basically a independent thought process. Okay, so generally when PhD students join a particular institute, most of the 90% of the PhD students have no clue about what area or what kind of field they want to work in, and forget about the topic that they want to work in. So they expect the guide to give them the topic. So that should not be the case with you. You should be ready with a proposal, with a kind of topic that you want to work in, and you should be the one telling your guide that I want to work in this particular area. Is it feasible or not? Okay, so that shows that you are confident enough to work independently without the guidance of your guide. Okay, I mean the minimal guidance of your guide. Right. So and one more thing is specific. Whenever you're going for a particular interview, and since I told you have to shortlist the guides, it is very important for you sometimes. It is actually very beneficial for you if you can write an email to that particular guide, asking telling him that you are following his research work and you are very interested to be a part of his research group, and you should tell them that you are coming for the interview on so and so date and you're looking forward to meeting him. So what that does is that your guide then particularly looks for you in the interview, and he'll take a special interest. I mean that particular faculty member will take a special interest in your particular interview, because since you have already informed him, and that shows that yes, you do want to work, work in his research group, and you are putting in efforts for that. Okay, so that gives out a strong message and shows that you are confident enough to approach the guide before the interview, right? So these are the certain things which are common to all kinds of PhD interviews. Now specifically talking about the institutes from India, if you are focused, if you are if you are applying for PhD interviews in India, so these things which I have discussed just now are applicable to all PhD interviews. Now few specific things you need to focus on is, in India, when you go for a PhD interview, it is much different than your CSR, net GRF exam, because in net GRF exam you need to come to the answer. It does not matter what kind of how you're approaching the question. It does not matter. But in PhD interview, it matters a lot. How you approach a question, the kinds of words you use. Like for example, if you're talking about some organic chemistry mechanism, so it's very important for you to know the terms: nucleophile, electrophile, anion, cation. Like over here, if I use positive charge and negative charge, this negative charge species attacks the positive charge species. That is particularly, it's okay if I'm discussing with you, but when you are explaining in the interview, you have to be specific with the terms. You have to say nucleophile attacks the electrophile, right? You can't use very layman terms. You should be using scientific terms in your PhD interviews. So this is one very important aspect that you have to work on. Okay, and what else is there is that in interviews, most of the questions are based on your derivations. What kind of they'll tell you to derive, for example, if you're applying for physical chemistry, they'll tell you to derive the kinetics, first order, second order reaction. And electrochemistry, they might give you to derive the various kinds of equations that are there, right? Like for example, derive the Nernst equation. This is the most common question being asked in the interviews if you are applying in physical chemistry, for example. Okay, and one more important thing is that they'll ask you beforehand what kind of area you want to do research in. For example, if you want to do research in physical chemistry or inorganic chemistry, organic chemistry, or the theoretical chemistry. So if you're applying for theoretical chemistry, then the question will be based on quantum. Okay, if you're applying for physical chemistry, it will be based on the physical chemistry aspects. If you're applying for inorganic chemistry, most of the questions are going to be on organometallics. 95% of the questions are going to be on organometallics if you're applying for inorganic. In organic, there could be a bunch of questions, right from name reactions. Carbenes is one of the favorite questions being asked by the interviewers. Questions on carbenes, name reactions. They will ask you the mechanism, how you approach the mechanism. And yes, one important thing in organic chemistry is, and in fact in general, that I forgot to mention, is that they look for the kind of approach you take to attempt a particular question. So sometimes what they will do is ask you a very difficult question. Now they know that you are not going to solve the question. What they are looking for is whether you get deterred by the question or you try and attempt it, and they look what kind of approach you are applying to get to the answer. So it does not matter if you get the right answer or not. What matters is how you are approaching the question. If they find your approach to be satisfactory, you have a good chance of cracking the exam, cracking the interview. And for example, if I am a student who gets the right answer, but the approach that I take is incorrect, even though I am arriving at the right answer, but the approach that I am doing is incorrect, that is a negative for me. So you have to be confident and you have to be thorough with your kind of work you are doing. I mean, the kind of approach you are taking. You have to be confident that the approach that you are taking is correct and it's not technically incorrect, right? So example, they'll give you in organic chemistry. This happened with me. They gave me a organic molecule, a big organic molecule, some natural product. Okay, and they told me to synthesize this particular molecule from phenol. So the starting material they gave me, phenol, and it was a very complex molecule. So it had a lot of chiral centers and it was very difficult to synthesize. I mean, even if I took 3-4 days, it would be very difficult for me to come to the right approach. So what they are looking for is how do I approach. So I tried my best and I came close to solving the question, right? So even if you are not able to arrive at the answer, just try and attempt the question and do it in a particular sequential approach. Okay, and what else they can ask you is, see, like I told you, that a sound technical background in that particular field will help you. So if you have a project, for example, in that particular field, for example, if you're applying for electrochemistry and you have already worked with certain instruments in electrochemistry, or you had a project in electrochemistry, like you had done your research in cyclic voltammetry, so you know how to operate the instrument. So obviously you'll have a better chance of qualifying, of cracking the interview than a student who has no technical background in electrochemistry. So this is one thing. The second thing is, there are two ways by which Indian institutes will shortlist you for interviews, based on your GATE score and based on whether you have a JRF or not. So students who have a JRF, they are, mostly they are selected in all institutes except for some very prestigious institutes like IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, IIT Kanpur. There many JRF students apply, and so only some of them get selected. But for most of the other institutes, if you have a JRF, you can say for sure that you are going to crack the interview. Then the interview is just a formality. For JRF students who are applying to other institutes, I'm not talking about the IITs, IIT Bombay, Delhi and Kanpur, because over there lot of JRF students also apply. So over there they still have the choice to select certain JRF students. But in the other institutes, there are only a few JRF applicants applying, and for them it is only a mere formality, the interview. They are sure to qualify the exam, okay? Sure to qualify the interview. Even if your interview goes pathetic, I've seen many students who are not able to see anything at all in the interview, and yet they get a PhD in that particular institute because they prefer JRF students. Let's be honest, okay? Because what happens is, I don't know the internal procedure, but if you are applying for the institute fellowship, like if you don't have a JRF, you will be applying for the institute fellowship based on your GATE score. Now what happens is, every guide has only 1 or 2 students in his lab based on the institute fellowship. He cannot have more than 1 or 2 students based on the institute fellowship. So it is very difficult for a guide to choose what kind of student he wants on the institute fellowship. Either the guide already has certain PhD students working with the institute fellowship, so then he cannot choose a person based on his GATE score. But if, for example, he has only 1 student and he has a slot for 1 more, then he should find you exceptionally brilliant in order to take you in his lab based on the institute fellowship. So it is a very difficult choice for a guide, and automatically your chances are decreasing if you are only trying to apply to the institute based on a GATE score. You have certain chance, but it is going to be very difficult. You have to be exceptionally good in order to get the institute fellowship, okay? Now one important thing that people overlook and that I want to tell you is, for most institutes what happens is, they'll give you a particular time. Let's say they give you a time of 9 AM to arrive for the interview. Okay, first of all, just let me check whether it's filming or not. Right, so they give you a particular time, that at this particular time you have to arrive for the interview. Let's say the time is 9 AM. Now what happens is, once you arrive at the institute at say 9:10, there will be already 50-60 students sitting over there. Let's say 100 students are called for the interview. There are already 60-70 students sitting by the time you reach. Say you reach at 9:10. The interview is not going to start before 10. That is there, right? You are correct in that. And you are saying, okay, the interview is going to start at 10. So what if I arrive at 9:15? It's still okay. Yes, it's okay. But now I am telling you out of my experiences, and this will help you a lot. So I was, say, let's say 61st student, and in total there were 80. So they give you a sheet of paper where you write down your name and your signatures and everything, whatever, registration number, whatever is there. So what happens is that they will call you according to that particular sheet. Now you are the 61st student to arrive. So by the time your interview comes, so the interview process starts at 10, and your chance will come around 4:35. Excuse me. The interviewers will be very tired by that time. So the time of the interview keeps shortening. for the first student it is, for example, for 30 minutes. For the second student it is again 30 minutes. For the 30th 40th student it is about 15 minutes. By the time it comes to you, they would have shortlisted their particular PhD students, whichever kind of people they wanted, and your interview will just be a formality of 2-3 minutes, nothing else. I'm telling you. So no matter how brilliant you are, you cannot showcase your skills in just about 3-4 minutes, and they are very tired by the time, and they have made up their mind, okay, we are going to take these 20 students, and they have already shortlisted the students. So by the time your chance comes, it's just a mere formality for them. I mean, they would just ask you some questions here and there, and your interview is going to be over. And that is what happened with me in several institutes. So I made that mistake, and from that mistake I am telling you this, that be on time, and try and be in the first 5 students to sign on that particular sheet. Okay, so this one tip will help you a lot. Okay, and if I come on to the particular institutes, if you look for it again depends on the institute as well. So if you are applying for, let's say, TIFR, and if you have a TIFR interview, now TIFR interviews are very you can say I like those kind of interviews, because over there they would test your technical knowledge. They'll ask you a lot of questions based on chemistry, but what else they're going to ask you, or what else they're looking for in a candidate, is smartness. I mean, concepts you can easily, since you have been practicing for a lot of years, you can master the concepts. But how much you can say they test your general aptitude, your smartness. So they'll ask you questions like, for example, I have not given the TIFR interview, but my friend had, and to him they had asked that he was given 3 glasses, and they said that in which of these glasses the tea will cool the fastest out of the 3 glasses. So they'll ask you certain general aptitude questions based on logic, and again, there's no correct answer in that. Like I have been telling you, there's no one correct answer. There could be many correct answers, but the way you approach that particular question, the logic you apply to come on to the answer, is what matters. Okay, so even though you might not arrive at the right answer, but the way or the logic you are using to come at the answer, that matters more than the answer itself. Okay, and in IIT, in institutes like IISER, okay, what happens is, first there is a preliminary round, and then there is a final round. So after the preliminary round, they shortlist certain students for the final round. Now one important thing is that, for example, you have filled up your specialization as physical chemistry. Okay, you have filled your specialization as physical chemistry, and you go for the IISER interview. Now in the preliminary round, you might get a bunch of interviewers who are from organic chemistry. So they are going to ask you organic chemistry questions. So don't think that you are applying for physical chemistry, so you should know all your topics of physical chemistry. You should know all topics of physical chemistry, but there are certain basic aspects you should know of organic chemistry as well. So once they look at their form, they will know that you are a physical chemistry student, yet they will ask you questions from organic chemistry. But those questions will be very basic questions. So just to test whether you have certain basic knowledge of other concepts or other subjects or not. So when you are going for IISER interviews, remember that apart from your specialization subject, you should also know basic concepts from the other subjects as well. Okay, and then in the final interview, obviously they'll ask you questions based on your particular topic. And if you have certain industrial experience, or if you have done a project in your masters, it is more than likely that the questions are going to be based on your particular project. So if you are a student who has done certain kind of research or certain kind of project before coming for the interview, be sure that 95% of the questions are going to be based on your project. Okay, so be aware of that as well. Right, and you should always know the applications of whatever kind of concepts you are trying to convey to the interviewers. For example, if the interviewer is asking you about chemical test, So you can tell about Tollens reagent, you can tell about Benedict's test, Felling's test, okay, and iodoform reaction and everything. But what if they ask you, okay, what is this? What is the application of this Benedict test? Now, how many of you know the real world application of Benedict test? Just tell me, how many of you know? Think about it. Do you actually know the application of Benedict test in the real world? Or take, for example, any concept. Do you actually know the application of that particular concept in the real world? So, for example, in Benedict test, it can differentiate between reducing and non-reducing sugars, right? So, in biochemistry or in the labs where the testing of the sample is done to identify certain kinds of disease that you have. So, for example, in the urine samples, if glucose is found in your urine samples, then that means you are diabetic. Okay, so if urine is found in your if glucose is found in your urine, then that means you are diabetic. So the Benedict test, glucose being a reducing sugar, changes the color, gives a reaction with the glucose being a reducing sugar gives a reaction with the Benedict reagent, right? So they'll come to know that glucose is there in your urine, and that is one particular application of the Benedict test. Okay, real world application of the Benedict test or the Benedict's reagent. So you should always be aware of the applications of the concepts that you are studying in the real world. So especially in the interview for Baba Atomic Research Center, the interviews are more based on the application of the concept, rather than the theoretical part. So generally in all the other institutes, I mean, if you can also tell the application of that particular concept, that will be some points some bonus points for your PhD interview, right? And right, I think this is good enough. I mean, these tips, and if you can follow all these tips, I'm sure you will be able to crack the interview, right? So I hope you found this video beneficial, even though my thoughts were a little here and there. But I couldn't arrange them in a particular sequence, but I think it might help you a lot, right?